Zokta Heilige Gemara, we are on Daf Kuf Mem Ches Omer Aleph, and we are a couple of lines from the top. Okay, 1 second.
You give it a name already?
Let me share it again. Okay, we are a couple of lines from the top of Kuf Mem Ches Omer Aleph. Zokta Gemara, Iboiluhu. And what we're talking about is what ability is there by a Shivmara to transfer Nechosim, and what are the limitations? Iboiluhu. Dekel la'echad u'peroishav la. What if somebody granted the dekel to one person and the pairs of the dekel to a different person? Now, what would be the law? Mishayer makam peri oiloi shayer. Rashbam learns that the question here isn't a question about a regular matana when someone gave the pairs to a person, to one person, and the dekel to another person, because that doesn't belong here in Hilchos Yerusha. That belongs in Amoich Rosh Hashanah when it discusses Dekel Peroisa. And therefore, the Rashbam learns that the question here is when someone gives away his Dekel to one person and the pairs Dekel to the other person, does that mean he's reserving for himself the branch on which the Perois grow? What is the impact of whether or not he's reserving for himself where the pairs grow? Zok to Rashbam, that means that will tell us if he was shar latzmai kolshu. If someone is shar latzmai kolshu, then the matna shchivmara will stand, even if the person ends up recovering from his illness and he becomes alive. But if he didn't keep anything for himself, such a matna shchivmara, the Mishnah tells us, there's an anan sahadi that he wouldn't have wanted to give it away if he was going to survive. He needs it for his parnas. So the question here is, do we say that he was mishayir for himself a piece of the tree, which would qualify as karka kolshahu, that he retained for himself, and therefore, even if he survived his machla and he became healthy, the matona still stands? That was the shayla. Zok to Gemara, imtim saloymar la'acher loy have a shear. If you hold that if you just say dekel la'echad u'peroisav la'acher is not a shear and he gave everything away, and therefore, if he recovers from this illness, he gets everything back, what would be the halacha? And we have to change the whole gears of the next couple of lines in the Gemara to conform with the Rashbam's pshat. So I'm now going to move over into the Bach, who gives us the Nuscha Gemara and how to read it according to Rashbam, which is totally different from what we have printed in our Gemara. So I'm going to read the Girsa as the Bach quotes it. Rashbam Goris, Dekel la'echad u'peiroisav la'acher mahu. Imtim saloymar la'acher lo yav a shear. If you're going to say that it's not considered a shear, what if he said chutz mi peiroisav? Now, chutz mi peiroisav doesn't mean that he wanted to retain the pairs for himself. There's two ways that he could give Ruvain the Gufa, Elon, and Shimon the pairs. He can say the dekel is to Ruvain, and his pairs are to Shimon. That's what the Gemara clears. But what if he said the dekel is to Ruvain, chutz me peiroisov, and the pairs are to Shimon? So he threw in now an extra phrase of chutz me peiroisov. He's not intending to keep anything for himself. But the question is, since he added this extra phrase of chutz me peiroisov, does that mean that he is retaining the guf ha'ilon, at least part of it, for himself? Ma'u. So Amar Rava, Amar Rab Nachman, Rava said in the name of Rab Nachman, Im tim sloimer dekad la'echad uperoisav la'acher loy shayir makam peri. If you're going to hold about the first shayla that we asked, that dekad la'echad uperoisav la'acher, the noisin amatana is not retaining for himself the branch on which the payrosh will in the future grow. What if he added another word? Chutz mi payrosh. There, Zok Rabba Amar Nachman, for sure there, Shire Mokan Peri. Now the question is, why just because he added the nusach of Chutz mi payrosh, why does that change anything? He's still doing the same thing. He's giving the Gufa Ilan to Ruvain, and he's giving the payrosh to Shimon. Zokt the Gemara, because we're invoking a halacha that Rab Zvid talks about, that we're going to run into very soon on Kuf Mem Chesamad Beis. I'll leave it to Rab Zvid, the Omar. Rab Zvid said, She'imrotza lahoitzi bazizin moitzi. Rab Zvid was talking about a case which we will shortly learn. He was referring to something that Rish Lakish said. Rish Lakish said that if you sell someone a house and there happens to be a mic around the roof, you do not intend to sell the roof. The roof is retained for yourself, as well as the top row of bricks. So if one sells a house and he wants to, and he has a mica around the roof, automatically by default the roof isn't sold, and neither is the top row of bricks. The Gemara declares, what if, even though by default the first row, the top row of bricks upon which the roof is not included in the sale, what if he stuck in chutz midiyuta el yoina? So he used extra words that he didn't need. Zok Rab Zvid, that gives him extra rights. Meaning now, not only do we say that he can use the roof, that's the default, but he can even put cantilevered beams sticking out of his roof all the way around and put a beautiful porch or walkway all the way around. And there he's infringing on the land rights, on the air rights below his porch. So when he's stuck in the extra word of chutz midiyuta el yoina, he's not just referring to the duta el yoina that he's retaining, because that he has by default. The extra verbiage gets him also those air rights to put his porch over his neighbor's property. So just like Reb Zvid said, Shem Ratzalaiti Bazizin Moitzi, Alma, what do you see from Reb Zvid Psak? Kivan de Diyuta Shire Mokam Zizin Nami Shire. Since he spoke out, Chutz Midiyuta, which anyway was his, we say he means to add the place of Zizin, the place where you can put support beams all the way around to extend his porch out. So that's what he said in the case of Rish Lakish, where someone was selling or giving away his house. Hakanami in our Shaila, when we're talking about a Matash Chimera, Kiban Damar Chutz Miperoisov, when he said, I'm giving the dekel to Reuven, which by default means he's not giving him the Paris. But then he spoke out on top of that, Chutz Miperoisov, you have a right that it means Mokem Peroisov Shire, he's retaining the branches that the Paris are on. And since he's retaining it, therefore, even if he survives this illness, according to the Rashbam, the Matana remains intact because it was not a Matna Shchivmera, which only works if he doesn't survive. So Zogti Gemara, Amarle, Rab Abel or Rabash. Anan Adar Rab Shimon ben Lakish Masnim. You quoted the halacha of Rab Nachman Amar Rava. You quoted it, Rava Amar Rab Nachman. You quoted it in reference to this shaila by a shchivmera who gave the dekel to one person and the paris to another. We actually quote Rab Nachman's halacha directly on Rish Lakish's case. The Yomer Rab Shimon ben Lakish said, "Hamoicher bayis lechaveroi, the Yomer loy almanah shedyuta el yoyna shali," and that's without the word chutz. The yuta el yoyna shaloi, the upper row of bricks he gets. So the Gemara declares, turning on to Kuf Mem Chesed Beis, what would be is bayis la'achar udiyuta la'achar. Where you're keeping the diyuta for yourself, there we know for sure, Rish Lakish told us, Lagaba yourself, you're for sure retaining all the rights. But what if you weren't retaining anything for yourself? Rather, bayis le'echad utiyuta la'acher. You were selling the house to Ruvain, and the diyuta you sold to Shimon. Now it's similar to our case bar Yerusha, where you're not retaining anything for yourself. You're giving the dekel to Ruvain and the payers to Shimon. Now, what would be the halacha if you were giving a matana your house and you were splitting it up, the bayis to one, the diyuta to the acher? Miyav ashir oy lo shir. So you just said bayis lazel diyuta la'acher. Do you say that he gets the makam azizin? If Tim Saloimer, bayis la'echad, udiyuta la'echad, lo yavashir, what if he just said plain? Reuven gets the bayis, Shimon gets the diyuta. If you hold that he doesn't get the airspace as well, what if you stuck in Reuven gets the house, chutz midiyuta, and Shimon gets the diyuta? Then the question is now, because now you used extra words. And on that, Rava Amar Rab Nachman said, Im Tim Salomer base bayis lechad udiyuta lechad lo yavashir. If you just said bayis lechad udiyuta lechad, if that wouldn't be a shear, meaning although the diyuta goes to Shimon, but he doesn't have the right to extend it with a balcony, if he spoke out the extra words of chutz midiyuta, that's havashir. Whose chiddush is that? That using these extra words means to retain some additional rights? The Amar Shemrotza Lahitzi Bazizin Motzi. Rabbi Zvid was one who taught us that Vibalti spoke out an extra word of chutz midiyuta. He means to retain additional rights, the rights to build a pool. Alma Kivin the Shire diyuta. Since he spoke out, I want to retain the diyuta, which he didn't have to. Mokam Zizin Nami Shire. He's also withholding from himself the Mokam Hazizin. So here you have two parallel shilas. The shilah of Rish Lakish is very similar to the shilah we had. Rish Lakish is talking about a case of a regular matana. We're speaking about a shilah of a matna shchivra. But the nekudas habaya, the exact issue that we're contemplating, is whether using the extra words of chutz mina diyuta or chutz mina payers, whether that has impact in retaining additional schusim for the noisein that wouldn't be obvious if he didn't speak out those words of chutz mina diyuta or chutz mina payers. In the case of chutz mina payers, it will retain for the noisein ownership in the branch that the payers grow on, and the impact of that will be that even if he survives his illness, the matana holds because he retained for himself the branch, some of the karka. And in the case of Reb Zvid, the impact is that not only is he giving the diyuta, since he said chutz midiyuta when he was selling the house, he's also retaining the schus to build a porch that's going to hang over the area around the house. That's what he means to include or retain for himself when he says chutz midiyuta. Beautiful. Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Menume, Amar Rab Nachman. Shchivmer HaShekosov Kol Mechosav Lacher. A Shchivmer who wrote off everything. Roin, you look at it. In b'machalik meis, if he gave everything away in one shot, kanukula. Because once he dies, the matna Shchivmer kicks in. But since he gave everything away, so it's a true matna Shchivmer, Omad, if he recovered, then Choshe Bekula. He gets all of that property, gets all those assets back, because we have the umdino that the Mishnah teaches us that he only gave it all away under the assumption that he would no longer need it. Now that he needs it, he gets everything back. But Ibn Nimlach, what happens if he didn't give it all away in one shot? He said, Ruvain, I want to give you this in this building. And then a couple of days later, Shimon, I want to give you these buildings. And he did it little by little. So if he did it little by little, then we look at each matana as an individual matana. And therefore, Mace, if he dies, kanu klum will be kaina. But if he recovers, all of the gifts that he gave away would be valid. The only one that there's an umdana on that he wouldn't have given it away had he known that he was going to survive is the last one. Because when he gave away the last one, he didn't retain anything for himself. But all the prior gifts that he gave, there were still property that he was retaining for himself. And therefore, those matanos will remain. But Frank the Gemara, just because he gave it away little by little, who said his intention wasn't to give it all away? It's just that it took him time to decide exactly what he was going to give to each person, but it was all in his mind going to be one big nesina. He was disposing of all his assets. V'dilma iyune kamahayin. V'hadu maybe, of course, he intended to give him all away at once. And of all the matanis, there was no shear, except it took him some time to process and figure out and decide exactly what portion is going to go to each recipient. So that's not how people work. Before the Shchivmer opens his mouth, he first calculates and clarifies exactly what he wants to give each person, and then he gives it in one shot. The fact that he was giving it in dribs and drabs shows that the original matanas were just those, and he was leaving the rest over for himself, and it was only the very last matana where he didn't leave over anything for himself, and it's only that matana that he gets back if he survives. Amar Rab Acha bar Menyumi, Amar Rab Nachman. Shchivmer Ashakosov kol nechosov lacher. A shchivmer that wrote off all his nechosim to a third party, and then he became healthy. Einoi chayzer. He's not chayzer, which is very fair. Our mission says exactly the opposite. Our mission as the umdana is that he never meant to give it away if he was going to need it. Yet we have someone, our Moira, argue in our Mishnah. Why? Because chayshina and shema yesh lo nechosim bebedin acheres. How do we know he gave everything away? Maybe, in fact, he does have another piece of property that he retained for himself. Therefore, everyone gets to keep their matan. Frankly, but our Mishnah seems to say not like that. If he didn't leave over any property that we're aware of, we say that everything gets reversed. So, according to you, who holds that we're always choishes, that he had a property somewhere else, and therefore he cannot reverse any of the matan shchivra that he gave, when would the Mishnah's halacha be applicable, where we do reverse it? You know where? If when he gave it away, he said, he didn't say, I'm giving this property, and we have to be concerned, maybe he has another property somewhere else. He said, I'm giving Reuben all my properties. So there, clearly, he's not saving anything for himself. There, if he ends up recovering, he gets it all back. Never mind that he said them all. He didn't say all. He gave away these 10 properties, but we happen to know for a fact that he doesn't have any properties elsewhere. If we don't know what he has, then yes, you have to be choshet. Maybe he has properties elsewhere, and even though he survived, the matanas remain. But if we know for a fact that he didn't have any other properties other than the ones that he gave away, then we could say the Mishnah's halacha that if he recovers, he gets everything back. We know by a matnas chibara, the last thing that he says is what's mekuyim. So he can say, I'm giving my nechasim to Reuben, and if a minute before he dies, he says, I'm giving my nechasim to Shimon, Shimon gets everything. The matnas chibara, the last thing that he said is the one that's mekuyim, because he could be chayzer from earlier matanos that he gave. Which means, if you're being nice to somebody because of that, he gave you a matnas chibara, you better stay with him until he dies, because you don't want someone else getting in there, and then somebody else will get the nechasim. So what happens if someone gave away all of his nechasim, and then he was chayzer only in part of them? What will be the halacha? So let's see what the case is. Imagine somebody had 10 buildings, and he gave away all of his 10 buildings to Reuben. And then afterwards he says, you know what? I want one of those buildings to go to Shimon. So he was chayzer from part of the gifts that he gave to Reuben. Do we say that now all of the other buildings that he gave to Reuben is batel, and now he just gave one building to Shimon? Or do you say, no, the building that he gave to Shimon, that he's taking away from Reuben. But all the other buildings that he gave to Reuben, he still wants Reuben to retain those buildings. So Zoktamar Tashma, Hulan Larishon, what if he said, I'm giving all my buildings to Reuben? And then he said, Mitzvah Lasheni, I want to give one building to Shimon. What is halacha? Sheni Kana, Shimon gets the building that he was given. Rishon Loi Kana, Reuben doesn't get any of the buildings. So let's analyze this. My lav v'shemes. Let's say b'pashtus, it's speaking where the person died. Now, if the person died, so let's think about it. We say the sheni is kana. Why is the sheni kana? Because when Shimon received that one building, it must be that the Noisen was chayzer from. It must be no. The sheni is koina. I'm sorry. Why is the sheni koina? The sheni is koina because he got that matana, and the rishon doesn't get anything. You know why the rishon doesn't get anything? Because vice the chayis, when the Noisen gave it to Shimon, he was chayzer from the whole matana he gave to Reuben. If you would hold that he's only chayzer in what he gave to Shimon, but he wants to leave the rest by Ruvain, then it should be the Rishon is koina and the Sheni is koina. But the Baal to Bryce says that only the Sheni is koina. Vice the chois, he was chayzer from the whole gift that he gave to Reuben, and the only gift that he wants with the Matnash Chivera is going to Shimon. So you have a raya that he must have been chayzer in everything when he gave just one property to Shimon. So you don't have a raya. Loi bisha amad. Maybe it's speaking where the Noisin survived. If the Noisin survived, then it makes sense why the Sheni gets his portion, because everything else was left over. So therefore, the Sheni's matana remains because the Noisin kept the rest for himself. The Rishon doesn't get because we say he was chayzer. So you see, he was chayzer. I'm sorry. So maybe he wasn't chayzer in everything. Maybe he was only chayzer in a little bit, and therefore bisha amad. That's why the Rishon doesn't get. The Rishon doesn't get if it was bisha amad because he gave everything to the Rishon, and therefore the Rishon's chelik is not chal. But the Sheni, he only got a little bit, which means the rest of it was left over, and therefore the Sheni gets it. So therefore, maybe the halacha is that just because he was chayzer in that karka, he still means to give the rest to Reuven, but the Reuven doesn't get it because it was Amar. Zok the Gemara, hachenami mistaper. It makes sense anyway to say that this brisa is speaking in a case where the Noisin survived. Why? Midakatani seifa. The seifa of this brisa, if you look at the case, you'll see it has to be speaking where the Noisin survived, because it says miksas on the Rishon v'chula on l'shein. What if he gave a little bit to Reuven and he gave the remaining to Shimon? The halach is Rishon kana. The first one will be kana, Sheni lekana. So let's think about it. If it's speaking where he survived, that's why it makes sense why the Sheni wasn't kana and the Rishon was, because the Rishon, when he received his gift, there was some left over. But the Sheni, there was none left over. So the Sheni is not koina because there was nothing left over after he got it. So therefore, clearly he wants it back. The Rishon was koina because the Rishon didn't get everything; he just got a little piece. If you're going to speak b'shemeis, then they should both be koina because it's a matash chivmera and everything gets given over. Elamai must be speaking that it's speaking kisha amar. Amalei Rabbi Yemer leRavashi v'tahavanami b'sham. Even if you want to learn the whole bride is speaking where the person survived, it still doesn't make sense. The reisha still doesn't make sense because the amar b'shlema chazar b'miktas have a chazar b'kula. If you're going to say that when the Noisin took something away from Reuven and gave some of it to Shimon, what he really means to do is to cancel out whatever he gave to Reuven, and now he's only giving one building to Shimon, that makes sense. Hainu the Shenu Mias Kana, that's why the Sheni is kind. But Eli Amit Chazar b'miktas lo have a Chazara, if you're going to say that Chazar will have a Chazar P'kula, which means he still wants Reuven to get everything, so then it's the same problem. Nahava kimechalik ulachad v'nayla likni. Then, but basically what you're saying is he wanted Reuven to get all of the nechasim except for the part that he gave to Shimon, and he wants Shimon to have that, which means all the way at the end of the day he's giving everything away, and therefore if he was Aymed, for sure it shouldn't be Gaina, because he gave it all away. So a karchach must be speaking. Halacha must be chazara b'miktas, hava chazara b'kula, and it would be speaking kishemeis. The hilchas of chazara b'miktas hava chazara b'kula, and reisha mishkachas la bein shemeis bein shamat. The reisha is where it says that the rishon is not koina and the sheni is koina. That would be b'monashim. If the person died, the Rishon is koina. I'm sorry, the Sheni is koina. The Rishon is not koina because we say he was chayzer b'kula. And if it was kisha amad, again, the Rishon is not koina because he was chayzer. The Sheni is koina because he got a gift and the person survived, but the gift didn't give everything away; it only gave away that little piece. Seifa, where it says that the Rishon's koina and the Sheni is not koina. That le mishkachas al elikish amad. So what was the case? He gave miktsas on the Rishon, a little bit to the Rishon, the chul and Sheni. If it's speaking where he died, they should mimonishich. They should all be koina. So we say Rishon kana, Sheni loy kana. If you're going to say that, forget. We say the halacha is that chazer mikdash chazer bekula. So that's why it makes sense. If again, what the Gemara says is lemishkach zelakish aman. If he died, then the halacha should be that they should both be koina. So the same miktsas on the rishon, the chul and the sheni, they should both be koina if he dies. But if it was amad, then it makes sense that the rishon is koina because by the rishon he gave over a little bit, and to the sheni he didn't give anything at all. Let's see the Rashbam inside. Zok to Gemara. Seifel mishkach lo b'shamad hilchach rishon kana. The rishon is kana. The matana b'miktasi. When he got it, there was plenty of other properties left over. The ikashir, and therefore, even if the person survives, the rishon keeps his properties. But sheni loikana, the loihava b'matana soishir. When the sheni got his chelik, he didn't get anything at all. The ibish shemeis, if he died, tarvayu likni, they should of course both get their full chelik. So at the end of the day, zok to Gemara, halacha l'maisa, we paskin that chazara b'miktsas, chazara b'kul. Ibailu. What happened if it wasn't the case of giving a matana to a third party? Rather, what he did with his nechasim was he was makdish them. So if you gave away all your nechasim and you survived, you surely get it back. What if you didn't give it away? You were makdish them. Hikdish kol nechasav b'yamba mao mi amrinon kol lagabe hekdish gamar umakni. If you bought the hekdish, you meant to give it away even though you're going to survive. Adil makol lagabe nafshay lagamar umakni. At the end of the day, I need to have parnasa, and therefore my kavana was surely that if I survive, I don't want to be hekdish. What about Hifker kol nechasav mao? What if he wasn't makdish, but he was mafker? Mi amrinon given the af la'aniyim kashirim gamar umakni, since he's totally being misalik himself on it. He doesn't want it at all. Ideal makol lagabe lafshel lagamar umakni, and he still wants it back if he's going to survive. What about chilek kol nechasav la'aniyim? He distributed all of his nechasim to aniyim. My mi amrinon tzedakah vaday migmar gamar umakni. For sure, he wants to give it away to tzedakah. Oy dilma. Or maybe you'll say, Kol lagabe nafshay, loy gaber umakni. At the end of the day, if he knew he was going to survive, he wouldn't want to give it away. The Gemara remains with the take.
What does that mean? That he was looking to
definitely
by the Levaya?
If you think about it, the old tzedakah tatzam imoves, it means he wants to give it away if he survives. Because if you only give him lachem misoso, he won't be a tatzam imoves.
I see. Okay, I thought he wanted to. At least they're going to say it to Levaya. You know, he left all his money to tzedakah.
You couldn't say that because his Yosy would get up and dispute it.
Right. What he wanted.
That's right.
Remember what did we hear from our mutual friend? There's enough money, no machloikis.
I hear.
Okay.
Amar Absheshes. Yitel, there's different nuschos that you could write. If you want to gift, a Shchibber wants to gift some property to somebody, what word did he have to use? He could use tinasein or yitein, but he could also use the word yitel. Reuven should take this amount, or v'yiska, v'yachzik, v'yikne. These four words are all good words to write or to say that will be makna, the nechasim, to the intended recipient. Even a lashon of Yerusha, but that would only work if the person that you're gifting it to is Beroyu Liyarshay, if anyway he could be your Yerush. That would use the principle of Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka, who holds that if you give it to anybody, if you want to be Mata Yerusha to somebody who's going to Yarshin you anyway, you could do that, and it would work with the principle of Yerusha. Therefore, the lashon of Yerusha would work for something like that. The Gemara declares, what if you use the word Yehenna Behem? I want Reuven to have enough from my fields after I die. Does that work? Mao, did I have a kula matana kamar? Do I mean I want to gift it him completely because I want to have enough from it? All I mean to say is, he should have some enough from it, which won't have any traction because he can't do that. Or what if he said Yeroben, he should see them, Mao. Yamud ben, he should stand on them, Mao. Yishin ben, he should lean on them, Mao. All of these Nischoyes, Dr. Moore, is Teku, it's a suffix. Okay, we'll stop here, but as Hashem, and we will mamshach tomorrow.